All right, everybody get your slides out for real estate commission rules. So one of the things about this is not a chapter. It's not you're going to find this as a chapter in the book. However, this is probably the most important information in the entire class as far as passing the exam. What I will tell you is most of the other topics are sort of application topics. It's not about memorization. Everything in this packet is about memorization. And I mean memorizing it down to where the commas are in the sentences. There is nothing in this packet that you don't have to know upside down and inside out to be able to pass the exam, because these are the important real estate commission rules that they test you on. It doesn't mean these are all their rules. They're not all their rules. But they are the ones that are most commonly and most heavily tested on. Now, the other thing I'm going to tell you is that you need to read the entire license, law, and rule comments. That's in Appendix A of your book. It's on page 615. That's where the license, law, and rule comments start. Don't try to sit down and read it all at one time. It's about 26 pages. You don't want to do that. But just make a point every week when you do your studying to take about 3, 4, 5 pages of that thing and read through it, and read through it about 3 or 4 different times. Make sure you're constantly referring back to these slides and studying these as we go through the class. I'm telling you, it's really easy to look through these and glance over like, yep, I got that, I got that, I got that, and then you miss it on the test because you don't have it memorized. I mean, it's like if your kid's birthday is September 21st and you wish them a happy birthday on September 19th, are they going to look at you and go, oh, that's close, I'll count it? Are they going to be pissed that you don't know their birthday? They're going to be mad. Guess what the Real Estate Commission feels when you don't know one of their deadlines? They're mad. And they're not going to give you any sympathy on this exam. Every date in here, you got to know it. And you got to know the difference between pre-licensing and post-licensing and continuing education, and when the deadline is for continuing education and when the deadline is for post-licensing, and how much the renewal fee is and when that deadline is. This stuff is very nitpicky, but it's going to be tested and you've got to get it all. That's why what I do with it is break it down in manageable chunks. We're not going to go through this entire packet today. We're not even going to come close to going through this entire packet today. My goal is we make it through, I don't know, maybe 6 slides of this packet today. Because what I want to do is break these license law and rules down into manageable chunks so that you can go back and study them all throughout the class so that you kind of get them down in your memory. When you take the test, that state-specific section, the vast majority of those questions are going to come from this packet of material right here. And here's what I'll tell you. You don't want to miss an easy question, and these are the easy questions. But they're only the easy questions if you've memorized the material. Because a question where you got to know what the renewal fee is per year counts for the same as a question where you got to do 15 math calculations. You get the same amount of credit for both of those questions. Which one do you think is going to be a better use of your time in studying? The one that all you got to do is memorize how much the renewal fee is, of course. And so make sure you put this at a high level of precedence when you're doing your studying. Okay? So the first rule that we talk about here is actually the licensure rule. Who needs a real estate license? And for what reason do they need a real estate license? The truth is, none of you need a license to sell real estate. There's no licensure required to sell real estate. If you came in here and said, well, I want to get a license to sell real estate, you're wasting your time. Because you can do that right now. How many of you knew that? You do it right now. You don't need a license for it. You don't need a license to do property management, to manage property for people. You don't need a license to list their house for sale. You don't need a license to represent buyers and help them buy property. None of that requires a license. What requires a license is getting paid to do that. And that's where you got to get to mentally to be able to pass this test, to be able to answer this question on a test. You've got to remember, it's not enough that I'm buying or selling or leasing real estate. It's, am I doing that and am I being paid for doing that? Because it's the payment that requires a license. Are you guys with me on that? It's not the doing it that requires a license. Devin, you can go sell a house for somebody tomorrow. As long as you do it for what?
Free.
For free. She wants to do it for free, more power to her. Nobody, it's a waste of time is what she said. Yes, I agree. So the valid reason to get a license is because you want what? You want to get paid for performing those services. So here's what the definition says. You need a real estate license if you're engaging in any real estate related activity. So give me examples of what a real estate related activity is.
Sell property.
Sell a property. That's a real estate related activity. What else?
Property management.
Property management. So I'm representing a landlord managing property for him. What else? Showing houses. That's a real estate related activity. Would representing a buyer be a real estate related activity?
Yes.
Representing a tenant? Would auctioning real estate be a real estate related activity?
Yes.
Yeah. Leasing real estate is a real estate related activity. Pretty much anything related to real property is a real estate related activity. So you're doing a real estate related activity for someone other than yourself. That's the first requirement. For someone other than yourself. And you're being paid a commission or a success fee for it. That's what requires licensure. If it misses on any of those points, it doesn't require a license. So, Devin, can you represent a buyer and get paid for it without a real estate license? One buyer you can. Yourself. You see that? Because what does the rule say? She needs a license if she's doing it what? For somebody else. Can any of you in here buy a house tomorrow and be paid the commission on that purchase?
No.
Sure you can. Because you're doing it for who? Yourself. There is nothing legally stopping you from doing that. You only need the license if you're doing that activity for somebody other than yourself and you're being paid for it. Can any of you go represent a buyer tomorrow?
Yeah.
Somebody other than yourself? Don't need a license? Sure. Unless you're getting what? Paid. It's got to be both. Both somebody other than yourself and you're being paid for it. Is everybody okay with me on that? Good. You have a question, Mary?
I was just gonna, flipping houses, that would, because eventually you're gonna sell that home for a commission. Yes?
Flipping houses. Who are you doing it for?
Well, you're buying it for yourself,
And?
then you're gonna sell it for
For?
yourself? For yourself?
So who are you doing all that work for?
Yourself, so you don't need a license.
So you don't need a license. That's exactly right. That's how you work your way through it. Am I doing it for somebody other than myself? And am I being paid a commission for it or a success fee for it? If the answer to both those questions is yes, you need a license. If the answer to either one or both of those questions is no, well, do you need a license? If you get a no on one of those questions, what do you need? Nothing. If you get a no, you don't need anything. You got to have two yeses. It's got to be for somebody other than yourself, and you're being paid a success fee for it. Christina is managing property for her parents in exchange for staying in the property free of rent. She need a license for that. She doing it for somebody other than herself?
Yes.
She doing it in exchange for some form of payment? Does she need a license for that?
Yes.
Absolutely she does. Christina's managing property for her parents simply because they need the help. Does she need a license for that?
Yes.
No. She's doing it for someone other than herself, but there's no mention of what? Any compensation whatsoever. It's got to be both at the same time. You have to be doing it for someone other than yourself and being paid the compensation for it. If it's either one of those is no, you don't need a license. So I've heard people say, well, I'm getting a license because I want to do investment property. I want to buy property and I want to represent myself. You're wasting your time if you're in this class for that purpose. Because if you're buying the property for yourself, you need a license. No. to represent yourself as much as you want to. Can you be paid the commissions?
Yes.
Sure you can.
How?
Who?
Because it doesn't hit both of the rules. You only need a license if you're both doing it for someone other than yourself and being paid. Either or doesn't require a license. So if I'm representing myself and being paid a commission, do I need a license for that?
No.
Absolutely not. No.
And how do you get the commission?
No,
If
you
you are
cannot
alone.
pay for yourself.
I'm sorry?
You cannot pay yourself.
Well, you don't ever pay yourself when you get... Who pays the commission? The seller does. So you simply negotiate. Part of my offer is what? Whatever commission you would normally pay a buyer's agent, you pay who? You pay me. You negotiate. If that's what you want to do. Now, I'm not suggesting you stop taking the class, but I'm telling you, you need to understand this rule because you're going to see it on a test. And so many people miss this question because they simply get stubborn about it. Yeah, you need a license for that. Probably not. You only need a license if you're doing it for somebody other than yourself and you're being paid. It has to be both at the same time. Are you with me on that?
Yes.
You're definitely going to see test questions about it. You definitely are. And they will be worded in a super tricky fashion. Yes, sir.
And you mentioned before that you can get paid salary, right?
Wait, that's coming up in the exceptions here. Yeah, it's good that you were paying attention, Kevin. You were the only one, probably. Everybody else was asleep when I mentioned that yesterday. That's coming up on the next slide. That's exactly. So hold that thought for just a second. But I need to make sure you understand this rule, just a very basic rule. So anytime you see a test question, which of the following requires a license? What two questions are you going to ask yourself about whatever they're talking about?
Is it for someone else?
Are they doing it for somebody other than themselves? And are they getting paid money for it or something of value, right? Some kind of compensation. Because if it doesn't hit yes on both of those, you definitely don't need a license for it. Is everybody okay on that? Good so far? Yes, sir.
When you are buying a house for your wife,
Mm-hmm.
is considered a unit or is another person?
It's another person. That's somebody other than yourself.
The spouse is not one entity.
I'm sorry?
They're not like one.
You are tenants by the entirety, but it's still another person involved in that. So it's still someone other than yourself.
Like if she were to get the house, then don't they like share it?
But here's the thing. Don't just have the commission paid to you, but have it paid to who? You and your wife. Because then aren't you both just representing yourselves? Do you need licensure for that? No. So instead of having the commission paid to one of you, have it paid to both. And then it's just them representing themselves. Both spouses representing themselves. Doesn't require licensure. Okay? The key here is, are you doing it for another person or entity other than yourself? And that's a key one too, that word entity. We need to talk about entities. Entities are companies, corporations, LLCs, limited liability companies. If you have an LLC that you're buying the property for, I don't care if it's your LLC. Is the LLC somebody other than you?
Yes.
Yes. So if you're buying the property for your LLC and you get paid a commission for it, do you need licensure for that?
Yes.
Yes, you absolutely would, because you'd be doing it for somebody other than yourself and you'd be getting paid for it. Because the commission is not being paid to the LLC, the commission is being paid to you what? You personally. And so the LLC is buying it, but the commission is being paid to you personally. That requires a license. What wouldn't require a license would the commission being paid back to the what? The LLC, because then the LLC is representing itself. It's not nearly as complex as you're making it in your brain right now. It is a simple question. You look at two things. Who's the client and who is the payment made to? If they are the same person, it does not require what? A license. If there's any separation between the client and the payment, it requires what? A license. It's as simple as that. So if you look at the name of the buyer, the seller, whoever the client is, and you look at whoever the commission's paid to, if they're the same name, don't even worry about whether they have a license. If they're different names, somebody better have a license. Are you with me on that? That's the rule, and you're going to see it as a test question. Probably not just one either, probably multiple test questions about that rule. Because the Real Estate Commission understands that people don't get it, and they get sick of the phone calls. They get sick of the phone calls from people who don't understand the licensure rule. They get tired of dealing with people who don't understand the licensure rule. From their perspective, it's a pretty simple rule. You're doing it for somebody other than yourself. Are you being paid? Then you need a license. That's the basic rule. Okay? Everybody good so far? Now, like every good rule that the Real Estate Commission has, there's always exceptions to the rule. And they like to test you on the exceptions to the rule. The biggest exception to the rule is the one Kevin just mentioned. Even if you're doing it for somebody other than yourself, and even if you're being paid, the way you're paid matters. If you're paid a salary, if you are a W-2 salaried employee, you don't need a license for that. So, for example, Edgar, somebody comes up to you today and says, hey, I want you to sell my house for me. And Edgar says, I don't have a real estate license. And that person goes, well, listen, I'll just pay you. I'll just pay you for your time. I'll pay you $50 an hour for you to sell my house for me. Can they hire him to do that?
Yes.
Yes. They can pay him $50 an hour, and they can put him on a W-2, and he becomes their what? Employee. And his job is to do what?
Represent.
To sell the house. What they can't say is, well, if you sell our house for us, notice that word. What was that first word? If you sell our house for us, we'll pay you $5,000. That's a commission. That's a success fee. That requires a what?
License.
A license. So the how you're paid matters. The first exception to not needing a license is being a salaried employee. But there better not be any if statements in there. Well, if you sell 3 houses, you get this much money, but if you sell 6, you get even more. No. If you sell an extra house this month, you get a bonus. No. Not unless you have what? A license. Because that if statement, it makes it conditional on your performance. That requires a license. That's the tripping point for having to have a license. It's how you're paid. Because remember, if you're a W-2 employee, they got to do withholding taxes on you. They got to pay FICA and Medicare, and they got to pay unemployment insurance on you. They got to jump through a lot of hoops to have you as a W-2 salaried employee. Are many people likely to employ you to sell their house that way? And you're likely to find very many people that are going to say, okay, I'll go through all the hoops of hiring you as my salaried employee and pay you $50 an hour whether you sell my house or not. Or would they rather just pay you a success fee? They'd rather just pay you a success fee, but that requires the license. That's the tripping point of where you have to have a license. Everybody good so far on that? Okay, so the first exception is going to be the salaried employee of the property owner. How about, let's stop talking about sales for a second. Let's talk about leases. A property manager. Let's say I'm a property manager for a big apartment complex. Do I have to have a license for that?
No.
Not necessarily. Depending on how I'm paid, right? If I'm paid what? A salary, do I need a license? No. But if I'm paid, well, based on how many units we rent out and how much profit we make this quarter, and you get a percentage of the profit, do I need a license for that?
Yes.
Yes. All of those things require a license because in all of those cases, my compensation is based on what? Performance, whether or not I do the job well. A salary has nothing to do with whether you do the job well. A salary you're getting paid for what? Time, not performance. That's it. You've got to pay attention to that difference because that's where they're going to trip you on a test. Here's the thing. I guarantee you when they give you this question on a test, all 4 of them, the person's going to be getting paid something. See, you're not going to be able to find one to go, oh, that's the one, they're not getting paid. That's too obvious. They're all going to be getting paid. But one of them's going to be getting paid a salary. The next one's going to be an attorney who's being paid a fee and they're selling a property as part of an estate that they're probating. Well, let me ask you a question, folks. Are they doing a real estate transaction, or are they doing their job as an attorney? If they're probating an estate and selling the property as part of probating the estate, are they doing an attorney's job, or are they doing a real estate broker's job? An attorney's job. So do you think they have to have a real estate brokerage license to do that? They do not. But don't take that too far. That doesn't mean attorneys are exempt from having real estate licenses. If an attorney's being hired by somebody to do just one thing, what is that one thing? Sell a house for them, and they're being paid a commission for it, do they have to have a real estate license?
Yes.
Absolutely. So they're only exempt if they're performing their services as an attorney, and it just happened to be performing a real estate related service as a result of that. So you got to look at it again to make sure, okay, they're an attorney, great, but are they doing their job as an attorney, or are they doing real estate brokerage? Because that's going to determine whether or not they have to have a license. Those are the two big exceptions you have to be aware of to having to have a license in order to practice real estate. So what is the basic rule? Give me the basic rule again. If you're doing a real estate related activity for who? For somebody other than yourself, and you're doing it for payment of what?
Commission.
Of some type of a commission or a success fee. Has to be both at the same time. Has to be both. That triggers the need for a license. And it works the same way. That's not the rule just for people. That's the rule for companies too. If a company is engaging in a real estate related activity and being paid a success fee for it, then that company needs what? A real estate license. So for example, let's say I have an LLC, Trav Talks LLC. When I am hired by a seller to list their property, it's not me personally the seller's hiring. The seller is hiring my company. The seller's hiring Trav Talks LLC to sell their house for them. So that means that when the commission check comes, the commission is going to be paid to who? To the company, Trav Talks LLC. So let me ask you a question. Is Trav Talks LLC engaging in real estate related activity?
Yes.
For somebody other than itself? Yeah, and is it being paid a success fee for it? So does Trav Talks LLC need a license for that? Absolutely. So not only does Travis need a license, but also the company needs a license at that point. Yes, sir, Bryson.
So if the company needed a license, who would go attend the class and then get a license? You know, would the whole company?
You mean the whole company can't just show up in class? Okay. It's a great question. Companies at their heart really are just a group of people, right? And so in the case of a company getting a real estate license, what it requires is that the people who make up the company already have a real estate license. So in the case of Trav Talks is one person, and that person happens to be what? Me. So in order to get a license for Trav Talks, the first thing the Real Estate Commission is going to make sure is that the person who operates Trav Talks already has a real estate license.
So when you say that, it's like, let's say it's a big company, like maybe 50 to 100 employees.
Okay?
What then?
At least one.
Okay.
At least one has to have a real estate license, because at least one is going to need to be the face that represents that company with the North Carolina Real Estate Commission.
Gotcha.
Everybody understand the question he's asking? Because he's saying, really, obviously a company can't come sit in classes and take the real estate exam. There's no way the company can sit for the licensing exam. And that's exactly right. So what we require for companies, and by the way, we don't call them company licenses, we call them firm licenses. Firm licenses are licenses for non-humans, non-people. See, I have a broker's license, but Trav Talks LLC has a what kind of license? A firm license. It's a real estate firm. That's what a real estate firm is. A real estate firm is just an entity, a company that engages in real estate related activity. So when I apply for that license for Trav Talks LLC, what I have to put on there is that the broker who's going to be responsible for supervising all the brokerage activity of Trav Talks LLC is Travis Everett, and here's his broker's license number. So what they want to see is that there's a broker who's going to be responsible for all the brokerage activity that company does. At least one. Yes, ma'am.
So if you're only one person and your license gets revoked, then,
Don't say that.
I'm sorry.
I need my
When you say
license.
people die.
God, me losing my license is much worse than somebody dying, at least from my perspective.
Then does that mean that there's no one to fall back on, so the company altogether loses it?
The company would not have a license at that point in time, because if there's only one licensed person within the company, and that one licensed person loses their license, then absolutely the company's license would go away as well.
If there's two?
If there's two, then the next man up, so to speak. You know, you just line them up and next person in line. Yes, sir.
If your company is hired to do a real estate transaction, one of your employees that is not licensed can go ahead and do the showings and that kind of thing.
It's a very timely question. I got one over here, but that's coming up on the next slide.
Okay.
Amber, what's your question?
Is there a ratio to the license? Like once you get a certain,
I said Amber, it's Amanda, sorry.
it's fine. You have one licensed person, is there a ratio, like you need one licensed broker per 100 employees or something like that?
So Amanda's question is, is there like some limitation on the number of licensed versus unlicensed people? And the answer is no.
So you have
The answer is
1,000
no.
employees and one license.
I could have one license with 1,000 employees, if that's what I wanted to do. Because the real estate commission is going to place all that responsibility on who?
You.
The one licensed person. So let's talk about what an unlicensed employee of a real estate broker can do. Now, we're not talking about the unlicensed employees of the property owner. That, you know, we talked about that back up. Show you what I mean? On this slide right here, we said that if you were the employee of the property owner, you don't need a license to do anything. Does that make sense? You can sell, you can lease, you can list, you can exchange, you can show property, you can do whatever if you're the unlicensed employee of the property owner. So you work directly for who? The property's owner. That's not who we're talking about on this slide. On this slide, we're talking about people who are the employee of a real estate broker. Real estate brokers are free to employ unlicensed people. Now, I have never been a believer in doing this. It is not something I have ever done in my career. I don't like it, and here's why. I don't want to have to know what the razor-thin edge is of what they can do and what they can't do. My thought process has always been, you work for a real estate school, get your what? License. But some of you might want to hire an unlicensed assistant. So if you know real estate brokers who have an unlicensed assistant, this is the rule that applies to them. The truth is, an unlicensed employee of a real estate broker can do an awful lot. I mean, they can do most things that the broker themselves can do. There's a lot of things that an unlicensed employee of a real estate broker can do. Look at this list. They can put listings in the MLS. So they can upload a listing in the MLS. They don't have a real estate license, but they're free to upload listings in the MLS. But who's going to be responsible for whatever information they put in the MLS? The broker who employs them. Does that make sense? Whoever has employed them, the real estate commission is going to place all that responsibility on the broker who's employed them. They can set appointments for buyers. They can balance the trust account. So if that broker has a trust account, like I have a trust account, for example, I could hire an unlicensed person to manage my trust account, a bookkeeper. They could deposit money in my trust account. They could balance the trust account every month. They could write checks out of the trust account. They could pay earnest money deposits into and out of the trust account. They could pay rent in and out of the trust account. They can do anything I give them the authorization to do. But ultimately, who's the real estate commission going to hold responsible for that trust account being in compliance with the law? The broker who employed them. Does that make sense? You need to know down here at the bottom these things that an unlicensed employee of a broker cannot do. It's a very short list. They cannot do these things. Negotiate. at all. And if I, as a broker, hire an employee to work for me, they can never engage in a negotiation conversation with somebody. So, for example, let's say I have an unlicensed employee. Let's say I hire Devin. She's unlicensed. I hire her as my employee. She's going to be paid a what? A salary. She's on a W-2. She has to be on a W-2 because she doesn't have a license. By the way, that's a big hint as whether somebody has a real estate license or not. If they're paid on the 1099, they have a what? They have a real estate license. If they don't have a license, they're going to be paid on a W-2. So I hire Devin as a W-2 salaried employee of me. And Devin does a lot of things for me. She's answering the phone in the office one afternoon, and Brandon calls in, and Brandon's asking questions about one of our listings. And he said, well, how much is it listed for? And Devin says, well, it's listed for $273,000. Can she answer that question?
Yes.
Yeah. And he wants to know how many square feet it is. Can she answer that question?
Yes.
Sure. Well, how long has it been on the market? Can she answer that question? Because what she's doing at that point is just relaying what? Just information. She's just relaying the information that's found in the MLS or in 100 different places. She's just basically reading information off to him. Here he says this, well, you know, I've been looking in that area and I just got some money from a settlement and I've got $265,000 in cash. Do you think they would take that for the property? What does she have to do right there? Stop the conversation, because that just became a what? That just became a negotiation. What does she have to do at that point? You need to talk to who? You need to talk to Travis. You need to talk to my broker, because I can't have that conversation with you. Can I take your name and phone number and have them give you a call right back? She can't continue the conversation from that point forward because that's now a negotiation. Are you with me on that? Yes, sir. Right.
So, can an employer decide to pay someone doing those what they can't perform under a 1099?
Ask me that one more time to make sure.
So let's say the employer, instead of putting them on a W-2, they put them on a 1099. But
They got to be licensed to be on a 1099.
no matter what you do, even if it's not showing property or anything.
You have to be licensed to be on 1099.
If you're employed by a real estate company doing anything with
Anything real estate related, you can only be on a 1099 if you're licensed. You could be licensed and still be on a W-2. It's okay to go either way with your license, but you
Sure.
can't have an unlicensed person paid with a 1099 for real estate activities. That's an IRS rule. You don't want to tangle with them.
In my case, I was working for a real estate company. They pay me as a 1099, but not as a real.
A lot of them do. They're not supposed to.
Business Development Associate.
Yeah.
It's totally different.
Yeah, they're not supposed to do that. I mean, if you look at the IRS's classification chart, and you look under real estate related activities, and it shows you the allowable classifications, and it literally says real estate related activity, licensed independent contractor, unlicensed salaried employee.
So, like,
I
say
mean,
I
it's
was
like,
paid that, right?
I'm sorry?
Say I was paid that way and I just found out. Hey,
Yeah. The liability's
I
not
need to
going to
go
be
to that
yours.
company.
The liability is the company's. So your employer who has mislabeled you.
Yeah.
I see.
And
So
now, this is actually a hot button issue now. Now the IRS has forced the North Carolina Real Estate Commission and every other real estate commission around the country, when we renew our licenses every year right now, we have to go through a series of questions. And the first question it asks you is, do you have any unlicensed affiliates in your office? And if you click yes, then the next question that comes up is, how are they classified under IRS rule number blah, 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 blah. And you have to choose 1099 or W-2. And it says right down there in the box, you answer this question under penalty of perjury, your license will be revoked.
Yeah.
If you answer this question untruthfully. I mean, it's literally right there when we renew our licenses, because the IRS is basically forcing the real estate commissions around the country to crack down on this misclassification of workers. Because it's very common. Because it's much easier for a real estate broker to pay you a 1099 than it is a W-2. 1099, you're on your own for taxes. I don't have to pay FICA. I don't have to pay Medicare. I don't have to pay unemployment insurance. But here's the differentiating line. You want to pay them on 1099, they got to have a what? They got to have a license. That's an IRS rule. That's not going to show up on my test, but just so you know, that's the IRS's rule.
So even if they hire an individual, or what if they hire their company? What's that company? Either way, you still have that license.
Ultimately, it doesn't matter because at the root of the company, the person is doing real estate related matters, and so ultimately the company has to have a real estate license, which is going to require the person to have a real estate license. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So it says that they're allowed to show property that's for rent but not for sale. What if it's a rent to own property? They need a license for that?
So that's a great question. I was about to talk about this exception. So the second thing that a unlicensed employee of a broker cannot do is show property to a potential buyer. They can show property to a potential tenant, but not to a potential buyer. The idea here is, it goes back to the negotiation thing. If there's a very high likelihood that if you're showing property to a potential buyer, that conversation quickly escalates to what? Negotiation. So we're trying to avoid that problem by simply saying, if it's for sale, you can't show it. So for your question, which was, what if it's a rent to own, can't show it. If there's any possibility at all that that's a sales transaction, even if it's the consumer who makes that change. See, I've had that happen. I've had people call me and say, well, you know, I had my office manager out showing one of our rental listings. And I say, okay, that's fine, right? Because they can show property for rent. Does everybody agree with that?
Right.
And he said, but here's what happened. The tenant's walking through looking at the thing, and they go, well, you know, we are interested in renting, but we really only run rent for 6 months. We'd really like to talk about buying the property. And I said, well, you just violated the rule. He said, well, we didn't mean to. I said, they don't care. You just violated the rule. So that's why I say it is not worth it for me to deal with an unlicensed person, because I don't want to walk that razor thin edge. Does that make sense?
Well, that changes right there.
It changes right there. Now you're showing it to a potential who? A buyer, just because they changed it. So what the real estate commission would say you should do in that instance is literally throw them out on the front yard of the house and say, I can't have you in here anymore. Sorry, I can't, we're done. I can't talk to you about that. And so there's always the potential for it to come up. But on a test, make sure you know that they can show property for rent, but they can't show property that is for what?
Sale.
For sale. For sale. Now, remember, there's a difference between the employee of a broker and the employee of the property owner. If they're employed directly by the property owner, can they show property that's for sale?
Yes.
Yeah, because if they're employed directly by the property owner, they can do anything. It's the employee of the broker that has these restrictions on. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
I know it's nitpicky. You see why I tell you, you got to really dig into this stuff? Because these are nitpicky little things right here that they're going to test you on. Yes, ma'am.
Does the commission ever go out and try to see if people are breaking the rules?
Do they have a vice squad, the secret shoppers out there? They do not. They do not. They rely on complaints being filed. But here's what they rely on. I'll show you. Here's the Real Estate Commission's website. And of course, you notice what they say. Oh, it went away. The first thing that pops up is to protect the public. Who do you think they're protecting the public from? Us, real estate brokers. Their job's not to protect us, it's to protect the public from us, okay? So, if you go down here to the bottom, that's what they rely on right there. Big button, right on the home page. You don't like what a real estate broker did? File a complaint. And you can do it literally from your phone. You can sit there, go in there, and here's the complaint form, fill it out, you can tell them who you're complaining about, their company name, everything, whatever you know about them. Put what, have you consulted an attorney? They want to know if you talked to an attorney. They want to know all this stuff. And basically, you fill it out here. Travis sucks as an instructor. Submit. Don't submit that, please. Because then I'll have to respond to that complaint, So,
But they give the broker an opportunity to correct the issue, kind of like what a Better Business Bureau concept.
Well, they don't give the broker the opportunity. They're not looking at it from the perspective of correcting the issue so much as did they make a mistake at all. Because quite honestly, the vast majority of complaints that come in about real estate brokers aren't actually a violation of the license law. Like, for example, my agent sucks. That's not against the rules in North Carolina. You can be crappy at your job. There's no rule that says you have to actually be good at this thing. But there are, so a lot of complaints that come in are quite, just honestly frivolous complaints that even when they look through the complaint, they're like, okay, well, even if the person did everything that this complaint says, there's not actually a license law violation in here. And what's interesting, though, is that sometimes what the consumer is complaining about, like the root of their complaint, is not what the disciplinary action happens for. Like we had this happen last year. Show you how dumb people can be. Somebody filed a complaint about a property management company out in the Outer Banks, and that said they were not getting their rent quickly enough. It's the 15th of the month, and we still don't have our rent. Well, folks, it is not uncommon if you have a property management company to not get your rent until the 15th or 20th of the month. Because the truth is, the tenant has until the 5th to pay it without even being late. And when you collect rent as a property manager in North Carolina, you don't collect it and put it directly in the owner's account. You have to put it in your trust account. And then you have to wait for those funds to become good funds before you can pay the rent out to the property owner. So if you do the math, if I'm not getting paid the rent till the 5th or the 6th on a lot of months, and then I have to deposit it in my account, and I have to wait for the funds to clear, for the check to clear in my account, could it easily be the 15th before I get a check out to the landlord for their rent? So the complaint was completely frivolous. I mean, literally the whole thing. They read the complaint over there and they go, well, it sounds right to me. But they're required by law to notify the broker that a complaint's been filed against them. So they send the broker a copy of the complaint and say, please respond in writing within 14 days to anything you'd like to respond to about that.
And that's responding to the commission.
And that's responding back to the real estate commission. Well, what the broker should have responded is, I agree with everything. Because there was nothing in the complaint that was actually a violation of the rules, right? Here's what this genius responded. This person's full of crap. I get them their money as fast as I can. I pick it up and I take it to the bank and deposit it directly in their account.
Oh my God.
So they literally just admitted to a license law violation in their response back to the real estate commission. See, we call that the Darwin Award, and people win that award all the time. So the way the complaint process works is somebody files a complaint, the real estate commission notifies that broker that a complaint's been filed and basically gives them the opportunity to respond. And how that proceeds is going to largely be based on your response. Because the thing is, the public doesn't know what the brokerage rules are. A lot of what they think. So a lot of times people will complain, well, I've made 5 offers and I haven't gotten any of these houses. Well, does that sound like a real estate broker who's violated the license law to you? Or does it just sound like maybe they're either not good at their job or just a tough market? But people complain for silly reasons. But a lot of times the actual disciplinary action is based on what the response is that comes back from the broker. Because they respond with something that opens the door to other questions. Oh, really? Well, tell us more about that. If they ever say, tell us more about that, shut up. Stop. You already said too much. Go talk to an attorney. Let them draft a response. Because they'll let you talk as long, the whole Miranda rights, right? You have the right to remain silent. Well, nobody said you had the ability to. They'll let you talk as much as you want to. And that's what they do. They simply open the door to that conversation. Are we good on what an unlicensed employee of a broker can't do?
Yes.
All right. Now I'm going to add something to this negotiate here. I want you to put negotiate/solicit. Negotiation and solicitation are the same thing. Here's what we mean by solicitation. I can't hire Devin as my unlicensed assistant and send her out to the fairgrounds during the fair to hand out business cards on my behalf to try to generate business and clients. Because she's doing what?
Soliciting.
She's soliciting. And that's considered a form of negotiation. She can't solicit on my behalf. She can do things for me once I've solicited the business, but she can't generate business for me.
You can set up a table, put your cards there.
She can set up a table and man the table and they can pick them up as they go by. But she can't go, oh, well, you should talk to us. We'd love to list your house for sale. And you give us a call and we'll be glad to come out and do a CMA. All of that is solicitation.
Right, okay.
The only person that can do that is somebody with a real estate license. So, I mean, she can set up the table, sure. And she can stand there and man the table, make sure people don't steal all the suckers or whatever it is that we got out there as a gift to attract them to come pick up a card, you know? Because they're not going to pick up a card unless you're giving away something, I can tell you that. Okay? But she can't engage in a conversation. If somebody walked up there and goes, well, we've been thinking about selling our house, how much do y'all charge? She can't answer that question. Because that's a solicitation at that point. It's a negotiation. And you got to have a license for that.
She just can stand there. She can't really.
She just stand there and look pretty. That's all she can do. You know, that's her job at that point. And so that's why when I say to you, I don't ever hire unlicensed people. That's the reason, because there's so much potential for her to end up in a tough situation. Do you see how that could happen? And so if you're going to have an unlicensed assistant, keep them in the office. You know, where they're not engaging with the public. Keep them, you know, hidden in the back corner somewhere, just doing things that you can control. Because as soon as they start talking to the public, that could go wrong for you. And you could end up in trouble because they've done something they're not supposed to do. Everybody all right with that? Yes, sir.
What about even if they're in a personal conversation? I mean, like with one of their friends or like...
Yeah, a personal conversation, that's different. You know, that's really different. You know, if a friend just comes up to them and says, hey, you know, I've been thinking about selling my house, I know you still work for that real estate agent. What she should say then is, well, I'll have him give you a call. So what she shouldn't try to do is continue to work the deal out, you know. What she definitely shouldn't do is say, is come back to me and go, listen, I got you a listing over at blah, 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 blah. Because she's not even supposed to be having that conversation, so there's no way she can get me a listing. Yes, sir.
Is there any space for a volunteers or for your spouse that want to help you in some of these tasks?
Yes, a volunteer can perform any of the tasks associated with an unlicensed employee if they're working on behalf of a broker. So they still have the same things that they cannot do. They can't negotiate or solicit, and they can't show property that's for sale. They have the same rules about them if they're volunteering to work for a broker. So you might have that with like an intern, for example. I've had interns before, who, you know, people who did their internship and came and worked at the real estate school, or worked with me when I ran the brokerage firm. And you treat them just like an unlicensed employee. They have the same rules.
Collect client information.
I mean, if somebody calls in and says, hey, I would like to talk to Travis, they can certainly take name and phone number. They can't reach out. They can't initiate that conversation. Because that's a solicitation. Yeah. Right. Somebody has to engage with them, and even then all they can do is collect the information. So if she was standing at our booth at the state fair and somebody came up and said, I'm thinking about selling my house, she says, well, I'll have Travis give you a call. Can I get your name and phone number? That would be the proper way to proceed with that. But the problem is, that's not going to be enough for the person who's asking the question. They're going to be like, well, how much do you charge? I can't answer that question for you. Well, sure you can. You know how much you charge. They're going to just press you and press you and press you because they just want somebody who's standing in front of them to answer the question. All right? We good on this?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
So in reading this, it says any person or business entity who directly or indirectly engages in a business or real estate brokerage for compensation for the promise thereof.
Mm-hmm.
That is a bit tricky there, because compensation could mean a salary.
Right, but and then the first exemption to the rule is the salary.
Right.
That's
So your point is understanding the complexities of this here.
It's super hard. It's really tough. I mean, that's why I only do like 3 slides at a time, 4 slides at a time, because getting in and digging into the meat of these
Do you
rules.
eventually go through that and pull those exceptions out in the clause? A paragraph? Or
They do in a paragraph.
Okay.
You know, they have just a list of, with the exception of the following. And the
Okay.
first exception is the salaried employee of the owner of the real property. You know, and so that's the first exemption to needing a real estate license.
Okay.
And then the second exemption is an attorney who's performing tasks associated with the practice of law rather than real estate brokerage. You know, that's the second exception. So that's the way they delineate it out.
Wow.
All right, last thing I want to talk to you, well, I have two slides I want to cover before we adjourn for the week. The different types of licenses that are available. First of all, there are human licenses and there are non-human licenses. The human licenses are all called broker licenses. North Carolina is an all-broker state. Now, when you take the licensing exam, it's broken down into two sections, a national section and a state-specific section. Be aware that on the national section, they may use the phrasing salesperson. We don't have salesperson's licenses in North Carolina. We force everybody to become a broker. We are an all-broker state. Lots of states differentiate between salespersons and brokers. And so, like, for example, in, let me think of a salesperson state. Virginia is a salesperson state. In Virginia, you get a license as a salesperson and you can work within a real estate firm and do everything. But you've got to have a broker to supervise you. So in a salesperson state, the brokers are the ones who run the firms, who run the real estate offices. Does that make sense for everybody? North Carolina is an all-broker state. So everybody in North Carolina that has a real estate license is a broker. The question is, are you on provisional status or have you gotten rid of your provisional status? Provisional status is training wheels. So you got baby brokers. What do you think you guys are going to be when you get your license?
Provisional.
You're going to be provisional. You're baby brokers. You got training wheels still on. And that provisional status has to be removed. The way you remove that provisional status is by taking more classes. Okay? The only difference between a provisional broker and a broker or non-provisional broker, they mean broker and non-provisional mean the same thing because you've gotten rid of the provisional status. The only difference is they've taken enough classes to get rid of the provisional status. And right here, it says a non-provisional broker is somebody, a licensee who's removed the provisional status by completing 3 post-licensing classes. I want you to highlight that word post-licensing right there. That's a word you need to memorize. Post-licensing goes with provisional. That's the kind of classes that provisional brokers take. Now, they're not in session today, but next week when you come back, Monday and Tuesday, there'll be another class down the hall down here. That's a post-licensing class. So all of those people will be provisional brokers who are trying to do what? Get rid of their provisional status. And there are 3 classes called the post-licensing classes. They're 30 hours each. They total for how many hours? 90 hours of post-licensing. So once you've got your license, so once you've passed this class and passed the license exam, you're going to be issued a provisional broker's license. Then you're 90 hours away from getting rid of the provisional status, from getting rid of the training wheels. Now, there's not a lot you can't do even with the training wheels on. The big difference is you've got to have somebody supervising you the whole time you're on provisional status. Provisional brokers cannot operate without a broker in charge holding their hand. That's the big difference between a provisional broker and a non-provisional broker. A non-provisional broker can operate without a BIC holding their hand, broker in charge. But a provisional broker needs a broker in charge.
Still get paid, right?
Still get paid.
There was another big test after about most of the
Is there another big test? No, there's 3 of them. One after each one of those 30-hour classes. But here's, you want to feel a lot better about that? We've never had one person ever fail a post-licensing class. Ever. I've been teaching post-licensing classes since 2006, and we've never had a single person fail a post-licensing class. You wanna know why?
You don't get
Because you
ten.
When you take that exam on the last day of that class, it's a 4-day class. You come in, you take that exam on the last day of class, you go to lunch, you come back from lunch, and we pass out this little bullet point review packet. And there's 36 bullet points on the review packet. And then when you get the test in a little while, there's 36 questions on the test. And we go through the bullet points with you right before we give you the test. If you fail something like that, folks, you don't need to have a license, okay? So don't worry, don't stress about post-licensing exams. This is the stressful one. Once you get there, I know that's what you're wondering. Once you get there, the stress is off. You don't have to worry about post-licensing. You're going to pass the post-licensing.
Is there any period of time that the provisional broker has to work under the supervision?
There is a provisional broker, as long as they're provisional, has to work under the supervision of a broker in charge. So the amount of time is going to be determined by how fast they take those classes. If they want to get rid of the classes, they can get rid of them pretty quick. 3 weeks, really. You can take 1 per week if you want to, and you can get rid of it. But the only limitation is how quickly you want to do it.
So as soon as you get your license, you can go ahead and sign up for the.
You can. We actually have some people that start taking before they actually get their license. They pass the exam, so they know they're going to get their license, and but they don't even have it in the mail yet, and they'll come start taking their post-licensing classes because they know that by the time they finish the post-licensing class, they will have already had their license and they can get credit for it. Yeah, a lot of people will just knock them out as soon as they get their license. Yes, ma'am.
I was under the impression you have to work under a BIC for 3 years.
There is no such rule.
Okay.
I'm not going to go into what...
Maybe I just remember wrong.
Well, I'm not going to say... Well, I'm going to say you're wrong about 3 years. First of all, if there's any time period, it would be 2 years. What I will say is that for most brokerage activities, and we're going to get into the specifics of this rule, but I just don't want to go there yet, okay? For most brokerage activities require a broker in charge, okay? You don't have to have, as a provisional broker, you always have to have a broker in charge without question. As a non-provisional broker, you can get away without a broker in charge in some certain circumstances. But a lot of things require a broker in charge even for a non-provisional broker, for a full broker. The only time you would have to work under somebody's supervision for 2 years is if you were doing things that require a broker in charge. And the reason 2 years is the time period is because that's how long it would take you to become a broker in charge. So if you wanted to completely operate on your own and be able to do anything under the sun, you would need to hang your license with a broker in charge for 2 years until you met the qualifications to become a broker in charge yourself. And then you can declare yourself your own broker in charge.
Okay.
So it's 2 years, but we got to get into the depths of that rule, and that's for another day.
Okay.
Okay? That help though?
Yeah.
Okay. As far as the other types of licenses, so the person's licenses, the broker license, we got provisional and non-provisional. How do you go from provisional to non-provisional?
Post-licensing.
We take 90 hours of what?
Post-licensing.
Post-licensing. 90 hours of post-licensing. And we're going to talk about when the deadlines are for that later date too. But I just, for right now, I want you to know, it's 3 30-hour classes. When you've finished all 3 of them, whether it takes you 3 years to get rid of them or 3 weeks to get rid of them, you're going to get rid of that provisional status. It just falls off your license as soon as you finish those 3 classes. Okay? The other type of license we already mentioned, which is a license not for people but for companies. Companies get what? Firm licenses. So any sole proprietorship, partnership, limited liability company, corporation that wants to be paid real estate commissions for somebody other than itself needs a real estate license. What that means basically, follow the money, folks. If the check is being cut to a corporation, if the commission check's being paid to a corporation, what does that corporation need to have?
License.
A real estate license. And if that corporation pays commission splits out to one broker and one LLC, What does the broker need to have? A license. What does the other LLC need to have? Another license. Everything that's got a name on a commission check needs a license, whether that's person or company. That's the easiest way to look at that rule. Does that make sense for you guys? So, like for example, some of you may want to create an LLC for yourself one day. You may go to your attorney or your accountant and say, listen, there's some real tax benefits of having your own LLC. LLC stands for Limited Liability Company. There's some tax benefits to having your own LLC. And you say, okay, well, what do I need to do? So, well, you need to create an LLC and then just have your commissions, don't have them paid to you, Edgar, have them paid to your LLC. And then you can pay yourself after that. Well, Edgar can do that. He can create an LLC. But where are the commissions being paid to now?
The LLC.
The LLC. So what does the LLC need?
License.
It needs a firm license. It needs a firm license because now it's being paid to commissions as well. So not only does Edgar need a personal license, but Edgar's LLC needs what?
A firm license.
A firm license.
You just apply for
Which
it.
are one and the same in a sense.
They are one and the same, except they both have an application fee, they both have a renewal fee, and therein lies the reason for the rule, because they want you to have all those licenses, because you got to pay all those renewal fees. I renew 8 firm licenses every year. I have 8 firm licenses to renew every year, plus my personal license. Just the cost of doing business. Now that's an extreme example because I have my real estate brokerage firm, I have a real estate brokerage firm up at Lake Gaston, I have the school, that's another firm, I have my personal license. You just start stacking them up and add them up. I have my own LLC, there's another license. It's everything that a commission check hits, got to have a license. Did I see a hand? Or are we good?
He answered my question, or he asked the question.
Oh, he asked it or answered it or both? A little of both. He's doing good then, okay? Are we good on the different types of licenses here? Last slide, and then I will release you for the week, I promise. Different types of entities. On a test, they like you to be able to identify the difference between this is a corporation, or this is an LLC, or this is a partnership. Well, I'm going to start from the biggest one, the corporation. What's the primary reason somebody would create a corporation? Protection from what? Liability. I mean, and protection from getting what? Sued. You create a corporation as a protection against you being personally sued. Because if you create a corporation and the client is represented by the corporation, who would the client be suing? The corporation rather than you personally. See, if Aaliyah represents the client personally and then the client ends up with a $30,000 foundation issue because Aaliyah failed to disclose it, who is the client going to be suing?
The corporation.
Aaliyah. Because Aaliyah represented the client. Aaliyah was paid the commission, Aaliyah is going to get sued. But if Aaliyah had set up a corporation, Aaliyah Real Estate Inc., and it was Aaliyah Real Estate Inc. that represented the client, and Aaliyah Real Estate Inc. that was paid the commission, who would the client sue?
Corporation.
The corporation. Here's the advantage of that. The corporation has no assets, folks. So even if the corporation loses that lawsuit, does Aaliyah lose her house or her cars or her anything?
No.
No. It protects her from that liability in some regard. Does that make sense for everybody? That's the primary reason for it. Here's why I point that out to you. They're going to try to get you on a test. What does LLC stand for? Limited Liability Company, right? They're going to give you a test answer that says the type of business entities where shareholders band together to try to limit liability. What are they trying to entice you to choose right there? Limited Liability Company. That is not an LLC. Because I said the magic word.
Stock.
Shareholders, stockholders. Corporations have shareholders, folks. Only corporations have shareholders as far as business entities go. LLCs, yes, LLCs do create some protection from liability, but LLCs are not composed of shareholders. LLCs are composed of members and managers. That would be the magic terminology you would look for to determine if we were talking about an LLC. It's there to create a protection against liability or to limit liability, yes, but it's composed. The people who make up the LLC, the owners of the LLC, are not called shareholders, they're called what? In an LLC, they're called members or managers. In a corporation, they're called stockholders or shareholders. But in an LLC, they are called members and managers. And so which of members and managers do you think has decision-making authority? Managers do. Members are owners, but they have no decision-making authority. Managers are owners of an LLC that also have decision-making authority for the LLC. So they can sign contracts that bind the LLC, that lease space or agree to buy property, whatever it would happen to be. It takes a manager to sign a contract on behalf of an LLC. So what buzzword are you looking for to identify it as a corporation? Shareholder, stockholder. They have to say something about shareholders or stockholders. What buzzwords are you looking for LLC? Members or managers, and who has the decision-making authority? Managers. How many managers can an LLC have?
Well, as many as they want.
As many as they want. There's no limit. It doesn't have to be one manager and a bunch of members. It can be as many managers as you want to set it up with. Yes, sir, Brandon.
So if you had a person that was going into business with you, they didn't have a license, but you did, and you opened up a company under your license, how would you pay them?
Well, they can't be paid directly for real estate related activities. They could share in the profit of the business. So basically they couldn't do the work, but they could share in the money. They could be like a silent partner in the sense of invest money but not do the work, because if they're going to do the work, they have to have the license. Does that make sense? So essentially, if you have a business partner that doesn't have a license, you're free to compensate them when you disperse. So like, let's say you set up an LLC. Two of you set up an LLC together, and you can both be managers of the LLC. That's fine. One of you has a license, the other does not. The LLC is also going to have a license. When the commission gets paid to the LLC, then that becomes money or revenue for the LLC. That money can be dispersed by the LLC to the owners of the LLC. And that's fine as long as that one owner who doesn't have a license isn't doing the job. They're not the one actually out there representing the client. Okay? Because they're not doing a real estate related activity. All right? Everybody okay with that? Any question on these entities? Partnerships, really not much of anything. They don't limit liability. If you ever see on a test a type of business arrangement where the owners of the business maintain all of the liability personally, that's going to be called a what? Either a sole proprietorship or a partnership. Sole proprietorship just means there's one, and partnership means there's more than one. But all the liability stays with them. If you want to limit liability, you've got to either create an LLC or a corporation. Okay? So, homework for next week. I gave out a quiz on chapters 1 and 2. And I gave out those concurrent ownership questions. Okay? I will send you an email with, you've already got links to videos on chapter 3, right? But I'll send out another email just to remind you of video links for chapters 3 and 4. I would go ahead and do 3 through 5 if you can. We may not get through 5, but we probably will start 5 next week. So plan for chapters 3 through 5 next week in advance.
What chapter is this?
It's not a chapter.
Okay.
It's a completely separate unit. Yeah, and it's in Appendix A in your textbook. It's in the back of your textbook, Appendix A.
Okay.
Which is right on the front of that thing. I'm sorry?
We've only gone through chapter 2.
We've only covered through chapter 2.
The property tax.
The math handouts are for chapter 3, so that's for next week. I just wanted to give them to you in advance in case you're watching the videos in advance. you could look and see what we're going to be covering next week math-wise. So that means you need a calculator next week. Please, your homework assignment is to go out and get yourself a calculator so that you're ready to go with it on Monday. All right? Good week, guys. See you next week. Yes, that's to bring back next week. Yeah. You do it and bring it back. Yes. This we will cover in class next week, so that's just in advance. So these two are to bring back as homework.
Are you gonna be uploading this video?